Hey guys, welcome to the show. My name is Mr. SLIN. Today we're talking about matchmaking, class, and weapon balancing. And I've got a lot to say, so we're just going to get right into it. I'm actually a big fan of the way that the game was originally designed. There seems to be like the sort of rock, paper, scissors design to the classes where one class beats another class beats a second class beats the third class can beat the first class. The perfect example of that is Heavy, Pyro, Spy. So Heavy and Pyro both short range classes, but the Heavy's hit scan and the higher health beat the Pyro. The Pyro had Flames, which was countering the invisibility of the Spy, and then the Spy with his fast mobility and was able to sneak behind the Heavy and stab in the back, the slow moving Heavy. So that seemed to be really balanced. You could look at all the classes in the game and sort of make little triangles or squares or find circular ways how classes beat other classes. And that actually made the game really interesting because it allowed for a bunch of different strategies. You had to make a team composition that seemed to be able to fit everything, that was able to address all of your needs. You could go for cheese strategies and stack one of a certain class, or you could go for a more well-rounded approach. And everyone hates hopping into a pub and seeing like a team full of snipers, right? But that's when you know like you want your team to be well-rounded, have a good mix of classes so you could address all the threats. And something changed within Team Fortress, and the mentality of players, it changed somewhere around the point where Team Fortress 2 started becoming free to play. Because when Valve decided, okay, we're going to do this experiment, we're going to make this game free to play, they needed a way to monetize the game. They introduced microtransactions and they said, look, we're going to start selling you weapons, we're going to sell you keys and crates, and you need to use those keys and buy keys from the store and open those crates and see what you get. And it was like, whoa, that's really cool. And now we have loadouts. And then I think it's at that point in the game where people started getting really attached to their classes. People always had their favorite classes, but you could always switch classes mid-round. It wasn't a really big problem. And then once you started like getting unusuals and getting like cool weapons for your classes, and then you started like doing man versus machine tours to try and get Australians to deck out your class. You wanted cool hats, you wanted cool miscellaneous items. Everyone always started joking. That's where the joke came. I was like, oh yeah, like TF2 is all about the hats. You got to get the coolest hats for your character. You got to deck it out. And people got really attached to it because there's this investment there, right? Whether you were spending real money and buying things for your character, or you were trading virtual goods, trading like actual other Steam games and buying into that market that way. But everyone still is exchanging goods to buy stuff for their characters, and that's just the nature of the game at this point in time. And it got to this point where you became so invested in a class or in a particular a couple classes where you just got that attachment. Everyone has their main class. My main class was Spy, and it's just that class that speaks to you, that the class that you have fun playing, or the class that you feel the most attached to, right? And for my medic, I have like two unusuals on it, right? You gotta completely deck it out. That's how it goes. And when you get attached like that, it it makes it difficult for you to want to switch. So the balancing of the game changes. People aren't interested in switching classes as often anymore. So Valve, in the interest of keeping you interested in the game, had to make it so that every class was well-rounded, that could address all the threats, that you didn't need to have a well-rounded team anymore. You could just have like all the classes could be more resistant to their weaknesses. So let's go back to our example. Heavy could kill Pyro, right? So they gave Pyro the power jacks. So that way the Pyro's faster. He could turn corners. He can get away from the Heavy. Pyro's really good against Spy. So the Spy got the Spicicle, a weapon that made him resistant to fire, a weapon that made his stabs silent, so that way people wouldn't know when he's killing people. And then the Spy was good against the Heavy, so they gave the Heavy the Huolong Heater, which just puts this ring of fire around the Heavy that makes it really hard for him to get stabbed by spies. And every class seemed to get something. Soldiers got gunboats because his biggest weakness was that he lost too much health when he rocket jumped. So now you just give him infinite mobility. You can just jump around the map as many times as he'd like, get away from any threat possible. Medic invests a ton of time into building an Uber. 40 seconds it takes to build an Uber. Why don't we give them the Vitasaw? The Vitasaw will make it so that way when you die, you keep 20% of that Uber. You keep 8 seconds back. That weapon blows my mind too, because it's the only weapon that I can think of in many games that like rewards you for dying. Scout got the Atomizer, which is a weapon that gives you a third jump in exchange for 10 health. If using that third jump, you're able to dodge a rocket that would otherwise do 100 damage to you, you just got so much value out of that. You just got 10x, right? Like you spent 10 health to save 100. That is insane. And Sniper has the Razorback, which counters Spy. That weapon's annoying, but not as annoying as the hat that makes it so you can't get headshot anymore. And it's like, oh my god, like it pisses me off sometimes that they introduce these weapons, that they made these classes so well rounded, but it makes sense, right? When you think about it, Valve's job is to keep you playing the game. If you get really attached to heavy and you don't want to play other classes, then Valve's interested in keeping you playing the game by saying, look, okay, we like you playing heavy. Let's make it so you don't die to anything else. Don't worry about it. You have tools to deal with every single situation. Keep playing heavy. Keep spending money on man versus machine tickets. Keep spending money through microtransactions, and everything will be perfectly fine. And it's tough because now TF2 is being shifted into an esport. It's becoming this other thing now. And some people haven't accepted that yet. Some people say like, no, TF2 is always going to be a casual game. Okay, you could say that, but clearly in the way that they're patching the weapons, clearly in the way that they're developing the system and getting the community involved, it sounds to me like this is something they're going to be committing to. So even if you don't have any interest in matchmaking, you better buckle up and get settled in there, because that's something you're going to be playing. So moving forward, you have to ask the question of how will Valve deal with this? Because originally the game was balanced as a casual game. It makes sense that all the classes are well-rounded, that everyone can have a good time. No matter what class you play, there's room for you in TF2. It's a goofy FPS shooter. It's okay that certain weapons are overpowered because no one's taking this game that seriously. It's different from that, moving to, okay, this is an esport, we're going to have tournaments, and people are going to start trying to win. So one option would be to remove all the overpowered weapons in the game. Take all those weapons that I just talked about and say, look, these are so overpowered, they're beyond fixing. The Atomizer, what are you going to do? Take 50 damage each time you do that third jump? That doesn't make any sense. Like the numbers that you'd have to change to make those weapons balanced seems very difficult. So we could pull them all out of the game. But then again, you can't really pull them all out of the game because people have spent real money, right? They've spent those virtual trading. They've spent all those virtual goods acquiring those weapons. So you really can't just take those away from people without giving them some sort of credit back, which I think would be very difficult to do and justify. So it's likely that all the weapons will remain in the game. And that is why you see in the upcoming matchmaking system that as of right now, it seems that all the weapons will be unbanned. So the other solution then, of course, is to just tweak all the weapons, just turn the knobs on the back end and make sure that everything gets balanced. And one of the biggest changes that came to TF2 was that Tough Break update that just came out in the last month that really balanced like a large number of weapons. So I think that's the approach that they're taking moving forward. But then they also have two other options. They have, are we gonna make all the classes well-rounded? Do we want all the classes to be on a level playing field, or do we want to make it like Counter-Strike? And that, if you look at Valve's track record, that's how they've balanced the game. So if you look at Counter-Strike, for example, not all the guns are built equally. You have certain guns that are well-rounded, like the AK, a gun that will always be the top tier gun, like an op, which is, I think it's more situational. You can't have 5 ops on your team, but you have these top tier weapons that are good in most, if not all, situations. And then you have these other weapons like the SMGs and the shotguns, and I don't know if anyone uses the Negev, but the idea is like these weapons are more situational. So I that's my guess. I think that TF2 is headed in that direction, which is to make these classes in TF2 more situational rather than saying, okay, everything is able to address everything else. That doesn't really make much sense to me as an esport. Now, I do have some stories for you guys. Just because I've been talking a lot about Highlander lately, and already as I begin to introduce this topic, I can already feel the people on the subreddit going like, oh man, like Valve hates us. We should just quit TF2 now while we're ahead. This is going to be bad for us. I'm not feeling so good over here as a spy main. This is gonna suck. And so yeah, I have two stories for you. The first story is comes from World of Warcraft because I know that misery loves company. So I just wanted to tell you that you guys are not the only ones who have dealt with this problem. There's players across many games, but World of Warcraft is the example that I chose because I feel like that game I have a lot of experience in. I've played for 8 years, and there's 11 classes in WoW, soon to be 12. People do the exact same thing in World of Warcraft. You start at level 1, you spend all this time leveling your character up to max level. Then once you get to max level and you want to do PvP or even PvE, you got to spend some time doing the grind, right? You got to play Battlegrounds or do the dungeons and gain the experience or whatever it is, the reputation points or whatever to spend on gear and gearing up your characters so that way they can compete at the high level rating and the high level arenas. And it seems like every single patch, certain classes get buffed and then certain classes get shafted. And then the next patch, certain classes get buffed and certain classes get shafted. And every class seems to have its turn. That's why people joke that, oh, this is the flavor of the month. Like, oh, this is the one that it's Resto Druid's turn to be good now. Or it's like, oh yeah, Resto Druid was good last patch. It's Warlock's turn to be good now. And it always seemed like some classes getting shafted, but don't worry, just wait your turn and the next class will be good again. And that makes sense because if you're a high level raider, if you want to be the world first to take down that boss, you gotta bring the optimal classes with you, right? And if Blizzard didn't give you the buff your class and make your classes give it that turn, then sorry, buddy, you're not coming on the raid this time. And if it's arena, they have 11 classes and it's 3v3, so there's only gonna be certain compositions that are actually viable, or they have high tier compositions, they have mid tier compositions and low tier compositions. But if your class doesn't fit in the high tier composition and your class is a low tier composition, you're not gonna be winning anything anytime soon. So that just sucks. I just want to say it outright. Like, that kind of sucks. So I feel bad for all the players out there who feel like they might be in a similar situation. I mean, it's always possible that Valve decides to go the route that World of Warcraft took, which was, hey guys, let's try and balance everything as best we can, but ultimately certain things are going to be at least slightly better than others, right? So really someone's going to get shafted at the end of the day. That's tough. But I think actually the WoW developers must have whispered into the ears of the developers over at Overwatch, because the Overwatch developers did it right. The Overwatch developers from the beginning were just like, nuh-uh, stop it right there. No, you guys are not going to get attached to Mercy. Do not get attached to Mercy. There's going to be no Mercy mains, okay? There's just going to be people that you're just going to play all the classes. The game is designed for you to switch classes frequently. You're going to switch heroes frequently, and do not get attached to anything, because we don't want that to be the case. We want this to be an esport, and everyone's just going to rotate around. So just get used to a role, maybe get used to playing support, but don't be a specifically Mercy main. Makes sense, right? I think that if TF2 had approached the game from the beginning as an esport, they could have taken that approach, the Overwatch approach, which is, one of the lessons that Blizzard learned from Valve. But, to say like, hey guys, don't get attached to your classes. Like, I know that there's very pretty hats in this game, but don't buy a pretty hat for your favorite class, because it's possible that, and this is what I believe, I think it's very possible that, yes, certain classes are going to be situational classes and certain classes are going to be higher tier classes that are more well-rounded. And that comes down to game design. When you think about it, slower classes being stronger is it's boring to watch. Like, imagine if you created two tanks that were just super strong but also very healthy, and so they do a lot of damage but they're just slow, and you're just watching like a battle of turtles, just like two turtles just going at each other, like, oh, I wonder what turtle's gonna win next. Like, that's kind of slow and boring, don't you think? Like, it always makes sense from like an esports perspective that faster stuff moving around, like not too fast, not to the point where you can't tell what's going on, but like a certain amount of speed is going to be more interesting to watch than just like two Goliaths going at each other. Like, that's why no one watches EVE Online, because you're just like two Titan ships that are shooting lasers at each other. This is a 2-week battle that we're gonna watch these ships just go at it. It's boring. You want to see something faster. You want to see something a little more fun. And I think that if you buff, like, let's say the engineer was the most viable, like, let's say the engineer is the most powerful class out of the 9 classes, then everyone would just turtle up and you just wouldn't see any movement. You wouldn't see any action. It'd be really, really boring. Everyone would just be standing there smacking their sentries, and you'd just be like, well, I wonder who's going to make the next move. Be boring. So, yeah, it's bad news. I know for a lot of you guys out there that are like, yeah, is he just a 6C6 elitist who doesn't really care about Highlander players or casual players? I'm like, no, this is just how I see the game developing. This is what I see is going to happen. You got these well-rounded classes, like these classes based around mobility, scout, soldier, demo man, medic. These classes I think will always be good. Medic, the slowest class on the team, because scouts can run around fast and soldiers can rocket jump and demo men can sticky jump. These classes will always be very good, like higher tier. And then on the other end, I think you'll have these situational classes, sniper and spy, which can one shot, heavy and engineer and pyro, which can slow the game down and be more defensive. That's where I see these classes going. I mean, if you imagined if they made sniper much stronger, not only can he one-shot people, but he's got an SMG that makes him so he can do close range. He's the master of everything. He can do long range and short range. The SMG is just super good now. There's nothing you can do to sniper that can make it fair. You can make it so that he can't be as good at long range, but then if he was just as good at medium range as a scout was, then why do you have two different classes? They both do the same thing. So you have to have a short range specialist, the scout, and you have to have a long range specialist, the sniper. And if you buff the long range specialists too much, then everyone's just going to be standing super far back and just sniping at each other, waiting for the next guy to make a move. So I think that's going to be it. There's always going to be these ones they're stronger, that are main classes, and then you have these sort of off classes, right? That's what everyone calls them. And I think if you go the World of Warcraft route, it's going to be a tough route. We'll see what happens. We'll wait to see what happens in matchmaking. But for all you guys out there who have invested time into those off classes, I'm sorry, man, but misery loves company. And you're not the only guys to feel that way. There's a lot of other players out there who feel like they get shafted by the developers. And and put yourself in the developers' shoes too. Like, they don't want people to hate them. They don't want people to be like, yeah, I hate that guy over in Blizzard's Irvine office. He just turned the knob a little bit too far to the left. He hates our class. Like, the developers don't want to be like that. They're not trying to punish you guys. They're just trying to make the classes as balanced as best they can. They're trying to design a fun game. There's one more thing I want to mention in this video. The reason why Blizzard balanced WoW differently than Counter-Strike or Overwatch is because it's harder to switch classes in World of Warcraft. To play another class in WoW, you need to create another character, get that character from 1 to max, then spend additional time gearing that character up. This isn't really a problem for the competitive audience, those hardcore, those top-level players, because they have the time to invest. They've already have one of each character. They already have those characters geared up. It's not a problem for them at all. This is a problem for the casual WoW audience, the players who don't have that time to invest. Just like in TF2, there's PvP and PvE. I'd say for TF2, there's trading and there's actual skill of the game. The trading part, the top level traders, they already have one of each unusual, and then some. They've already decked out their characters. For the lower level traders, they maybe only have 1 or 2 unusuals. They have to pick and choose which classes they're going to invest in. For the skill side of the game, there's the top end players. These guys already, they know how to play every single class already. It's not a problem for them. The lower level TF2 players have probably picked a main class. They're like, yeah, I really want to invest my time in this one specific class. These guys, it's harder for these lower end players, these casual players, to swap classes. And that's why, just like in TF2, where they homogenized the classes and made them resistant to their weaknesses, this is even more so the case in World of Warcraft, where it's even harder to switch classes, because each class in WoW feels so similar. They all can do the same things. And in addition to that, they gave their classes specializations. So each specialization gives you the ability to swap roles whenever you want without having to create new characters. So like a druid can have a tank specialization, a DPS specialization, and a healer specialization, just like how a paladin can have a tank specialization, a DPS specialization, and a healing specialization. And it's important for Blizzard to make each class and specialization similar, to homogenize the game and make them all viable, because they want you to continue your subscription. They need you to continue paying $14.99 each month to continue playing World of Warcraft. If they decided, okay, we're gonna shaft Warlock this patch, or okay, we're gonna buff tanks, and your class didn't have a tank spec, then you'd just be like, I'm over it. I'm just gonna stop. I'm gonna unsubscribe. I'm done with this thing. Just like in TF2, where to keep you locked in, to keep you playing the game, they had to make it so that your favorite class stayed viable. What I like about Counter-Strike is that every weapon is very different, and every weapon fills a specific need. It's the same case in Overwatch, where each hero feels different, distinct, and unique. And that's why I think that TF2 will be designed the same way as an esport. It makes sense to have 9 unique classes doing 9 unique things instead of having 9 unique classes all doing the same things. And unlike WoW, in Counter-Strike and TF2 and Dota, you can swap classes with the press of a button. Sure, you have to, in TF2 it's a little bit harder. You have to buy and trade to access some of the weapons in TF2, but it's definitely not nearly as difficult to do that as it is in World of Warcraft, where you actually need to invest the time to get a character up, unless you're going to pay like a Chinese gold farmer to get a max level character, and that's against the rules. So it's way easier in TF2 to like acquire those weapons than it is to acquire a max level character that's fully geared in World of Warcraft. Now, the thing that Valve has done is that they've proven that they can still make bank in CSGO. They're making so much money with that game, it's insane, despite not making each gun homogenized. So yes, you have skins in Counter-Strike. Yes, you've committed to certain weapons, but it's definitely not the same way. They're still making money, the guns are not homogenized, and that's still working for them. It works for an esport. Same thing with Overwatch. With Overwatch, they want Overwatch to become an esport, so rather than making you commit to certain things, they said, look, it's going to be $60 for the game. Then you have access to everything. You can swap it whenever you want. There's no problems here. That's what they need to do with TF2. They need to make it, they don't need to homogenize all the classes. If they homogenize all the classes, they'll run into the same problems that World of Warcraft had. They need to specialize, just like they did in CSGO. And once they make these specializations, they'll shift the focus of the game. I mean, yes, again, they were previously designing the game for a casual audience, right? That needed to make everyone happy. If you're shifting to an esport, you need to balance the game differently. So I think that'll encourage off-classing to fit specific needs. And like I said, you'll have this differentiation like you do in Counter-Strike. So yeah, that was the point I was trying to make there. It seems like Overwatch is going to be a decent esport, so Valve is creating this esport that competes with that. I think it'll be Overwatch and TF2, 2 similar games that compete in the same area, just like how Heroes of the Storm competes with Dota 2 in the same area there. And they're just going to fight over that, and TF2 is heading in the direction of becoming an esport. And if you're going to do an esport, you got to do it right. And it's way more interesting and just better to have an esport where 9 different classes do 9 different things instead of 9 different classes doing one thing. And the only reason this exists, the only reason 9 different classes do one thing in World of Warcraft is because they couldn't jeopardize the subscription base. They needed to keep a hold of everybody. They need to preserve that subscription base as best they could. In the case of Valve, they've already proven, like I said, with Counter-Strike, that they can still make money, that Valve can do no wrong, and I think that they'll be just fine. There's going to be a certain percentage of people who get shafted. It's the casual audience that will get shafted, really. The casual audience that was playing TF2, which was designed to be a casual game. That is the audience that gets shafted. On the bright side, you already have a leg up against people who never played TF2 before when it comes to like skilling up in matchmaking. Or if you're not interested in matchmaking at all, the pubs thing will still be there. The thing that you need to keep in mind, though, is that if TF2 is shifting towards becoming an esport, then the balancing of the game will head towards becoming an esport. You'll see the weapon balance changes, which we've already seen with Tough Break, and you'll see the classes, like I said, start to become more specialized and less homogenized, which threatens that investment, that thing that we were talking about earlier. So yes, sucks for casual players. I'm sorry. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. Hopefully you feel just as bad as the WoW players do, who also feel terrible too. And I'm sorry. So that's my first story. Second story is it has to do with 4 of my favorite games. I'm a guy that loves strategy. So 4 of my favorite games are Tic-Tac-Toe, Connect 4, Checkers, and Chess. In that order of increasing complexity: Tic-Tac-Toe, Connect 4, Checkers, Chess. These are all games that you could consider competitive. You could technically in Tic-Tac-Toe, I am competing against you. So you could technically have a Tic-Tac-Toe tournament, but Tic-Tac-Toe is not very complex, right? Like we have 2 pieces that are equally weighted, and there's only 9 places you can put those pieces, so there's really not that many permutations. It's very easy to figure out that game. That is I would call that a mirror matchup, by the way. Same thing with Connect 4, actually. Connect 4 is a mirror matchup. You got red pieces, I got black pieces. We have a slightly larger board, so there's more permutations, but you can actually figure out how to beat Connect 4. I'll put a link in the description of the stream. There's a guy who wrote a paper that I use, because Connect 4 is a game that I love, that you can actually figure out the best possible moves to make it so that you either win or draw every time you play Connect 4. So that's that. And then there's checkers, which is a little more complicated, and then chess obviously is like way too complicated. And for a lot of people, chess is way too complicated, and they're very happy playing checkers. And they do have checkers tournaments, and there is strategy there. I think, and I don't want you to get the wrong idea. Like, I'm not trying to say that Highlander players are simplistic, and I'm not trying to say that Highlander players are playing this game that will never be as good as chess or whatever, even though I said that in the other video. I'm not trying to say that you guys are playing a bad game, because these 4 games to me are timeless. These are games that everybody enjoys. Everyone loves Connect 4. Everyone loves tic-tac-toe. Everyone loves chess and checkers. These are all great games. There's room in the world for all of them. But when you really look at it hard, look at it as hard as you can, you're going to realize that, yes, there's a reason why there's grandmasters in chess, and there's not really that many grandmasters in checkers. Chess is just a better competitive game. And I personally believe that 6v6 is a better competitive game than Highlander is, but I also do love Highlander. I think Highlander is a great game, and if there was no such thing as 6v6, if there was no such thing as chess, I'd probably be playing checkers. I'd probably be playing Highlander. In fact, I have played Highlander. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, even though there's multiple game modes and people will always go back and forth and be like, well, my game mode's better than yours, it doesn't matter which one's chess, which one's checkers. If you think that, Highlander is chess and you think that 6v6 is checkers, that's fine. There's room in the world for both of those games to exist. They're both competitive. People love those games. It's totally fine to love checkers. It's totally fine to love chess. Whichever one you like. Pick whichever game you like. They're both fun. So yeah, I know I've been giving Highlander a hard time the last couple days. This video probably doesn't make it any better. But yeah, worst case scenario, if Valve totally takes a big fat crap on your class, then I'm sorry, and misery loves company. If it turns out that Highlander is not a good game competitively, then I'm sorry, but also take comfort in the fact that, there's room in the world for all these games. And of course, I could be totally wrong, right? I could be totally wrong, and maybe Valve decides to go that World of Warcraft route and make all the classes equally balanced, and maybe they decide to do something different with 6v6 or Highlander. In fact, I think at the time of this video, from what I've been hearing talking to the players that are in matchmaking, there's no class limits in 6v6, and there's no class limits in 9v9. So it might not even be Highlander. Valve might not even be setting up for Highlander. They could be setting up for Highlander, but they could also just be setting up for a question of like which number of players is better in the server. Like they could, from what I hear, it's so easy for them on the back end to just twist the numbers. We could be playing 5-on-5. Who knows? They're just gonna test a bunch of different things, see what works, see what doesn't work. And as far as balancing goes, it's quite possible that with this new update coming out, and without these class limits, that certain strategies become more viable. And I think that it's possible that you could be seeing things like, just like in Hearthstone, where you have aggro decks and control decks, you could be seeing in matchmaking a situation where it's like, we're going to run a really tanky setup. We're going to run pyro heavy engineer and turtle our way and slowly win the game that way, versus strategies that are highly mobile, that go for the rotations, that don't go for direct fights. That would be cool. We could see a diverse number of strategies, people trying different setups to go up against each other. I think that'd be way more interesting, because as I mentioned in yesterday's video, I think that having constant mirror matchups is not as interesting. In World of Warcraft, for example, in those 3v3s, no one really enjoys the mirror matchup as much. It's more interesting to see one composition versus a different composition. And that's one of the things that's been missing in both Highlander and Sixes, is that you don't have these interesting different class compositions that you will be seeing in Overwatch. Because in Overwatch, I think, yeah, right now Mercy's maybe a little too strong. Every team composition seems to be running a Mercy, but potentially you could be seeing a wider variety of team compositions than you're seeing right now at 6s and 9s. So yeah, that's just about all I had to say in this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know you guys have been leaving comments. I read all of them. And yeah, see you on the next video.